Hello and welcome back to Witchfinder's Gaming Vault. For this review, it's not a game that I've pulled randomly out of my tin. This is a game that I specifically want to play, and there's a reason for that, and the game is Niterider, Commodore 64 game. Now, I bought this in a bundle of games off eBay recently. I've got absolutely no intention of keeping this game because I'm pretty sure it's going to be terrible, and it's reasonably desirable in terms of people wanting to buy it on eBay as well. So I'm definitely going to sell it. But I wanted to have a look at it because I thought it might be interesting to look at before I do so. So let's take a look at the fact file for the game. Niterider was released in 1984 in Europe. It's published by Ace Advanced Computer Entertainment, no relation to the games magazine of the same name as far as I'm aware. And it was developed by Richard and David Darling, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. The price I paid for this was £5.03, which is basically a proportion of the bundle cost. The bundle cost about 55 quid and it had 11 games in it. The going rate for this game on eBay, I've seen it go for about £6 plus, so I should get my money back when I do decide to sell it. So as I mentioned, this game was developed by Richard and David Darling, and this is one of the games created with their infamous Games Creator program. Now that was responsible for lovely games that were published by Mastertronic, such as Bionic Granny, Jungle Story and BMX Racers, but they also released a number of games in this Ace packaging, including games like Mind Control and Darkstar, which were then republished by Mastertronic, but then there were also a couple of games like Niterider and Westworld that weren't. So that's why I thought it might be interesting to take a look at it, even though I'm pretty sure it's going to be terrible. So without further ado, let's take a look at Niterider. Here's the packaging for the game then, and quite obviously this isn't an officially licensed Niterider game because the title's different. This is obviously just a cash in on the success of the famous TV show from the early 80s. But there's the Trans Am, obviously supposed to be Kit, and a couple of motorbikes chasing it with a desert in the background, and the Ace logo in the bottom left there. So moving on to the spine, very pale. You can see Niterider there on it, and that's about it. Very pale blue. And on the back, basically there's no instructions inside, the instructions are on the back along with a description. You're zooming lazily across the Nevada desert in your souped up black Trans Am, looking down the long dusty road flanked by miles of arid land spotted with giant cacti. Suddenly you hear bikes, you look in the mirror and your heart starts pounding. You're being chased by a gang of Hell's Angels. It goes on to say you've got to avoid oncoming vehicles and road hazards. The only chance you have is to outmaneuver them and drop oil to cause them to skid and crash. After you've destroyed 6 bikes, the Hells Angels become more relentless. You're driving at almost maximum speed, making it extremely difficult. Can you survive against the odds? So it's got some features: smooth moving, high-res multicolour graphics, 100% machine code for super fast action, sensational synthesized sound effects and catchy tunes, and multi-levels. And it's also got the loading instructions on the back there. So you can see already an early example of the Darling brothers sort of over-egging the quality of the games, just as what happened when they eventually formed Codemasters and did the same kind of thing. So there you go, that is the back cover, and that is the front cover in fact. Let's just quickly take a look at the tape before I load it up. Pretty nicely presented. As you can see, you've got the Ace logo on it again, and Niterider, and it says Ace 004, that's the catalogue number. I think there are about 6 games released by this publisher, which I believe is just self-published effectively, the Darling brothers publishing their own games before they did a contract with Mastertronic for them to do the publishing instead. So there you go, that's the tape. Let's load it up and see what the game's like. Just coming back to the cover briefly, I've just noticed there's a typo on the back of it there. It's actually a gang of Hell's Angels that are chasing you, although it does correct that later on there. It does say Hell's Angels. So midway through loading the game, this screen appears which has the instructions on. This was a similar kind of thing to what they did in the Mastertronic releases, with a screen describing how the game works and the controls and things like that. So as you can see, it says Niterider by Ace. Drive swiftly through the desert, it says. Not the desert, but the desert. Avoid the numerous cacti and the other obstacles. Don't crash into the other cars or motorbikes. You can drop oil on the road in front of a bike or you will crash, but be sparing with the oil because it diminishes your score. Notice there it says in front, all as one word for some reason. And then it goes on to say if you cause 6 crashes you'll go up a level. Good luck. Again, no space in that either. So let's press a key to continue. And it's got the controls, and it also says you can use a joystick into port 2. Dropping oil uses 50 points. Press key to load the game. And the game then starts loading. Right then, so the game's loaded, and if you've seen any of these Games Creator games from the Darling brothers before, you'll know there's no title screen or anything like that. It just goes straight into gameplay as soon as it loads, and that's exactly what happened here, and then the game ended because I wasn't interacting with it. So there we go. So first thing I've got to mention is those spelling mistakes on the inlay and the instructions when the game was loaded. Maybe that wasn't a spelling mistake, because this really does look like custard, so maybe it was a desert and not a desert, but I think it was supposed to be a desert. The Darling brothers at that point in 1984 were sort of 16, 17 years old, so some of those spelling mistakes weren't really very good for that age. They should have at least been getting someone to proofread it. It seems like their spelling wasn't very good generally, because I remember a number of spelling mistakes on some of their Mastertronic games as well. But there you go. We'll move on from that and take a look at the game then. So here we go. So if you've seen any of these games creator games before, you'll know full well what to expect. There's a number of sprites moving along very sort of jerkily for the most part. Actually, the scrolling's not too bad on this one. And the idea of the game is to avoid the cactuses and the oncoming vehicles, which I failed to do in that case. And you've got to drop oil on the Hell's Angels that are coming up behind you. So yeah, it's basically just the same sprites repeated at random coming up along the screen, mainly down the screen, and a couple of ones coming up the screen behind you, which are the ones you've got to get with the oil slicks. I think it was 5 or 6 I've got to get. I think that's 5 or 6 without crashing into something though, so that's immediately killed me off there. So yeah, your score just continually increases. They're all very much a variation on a theme. This one's like a bit like BMX Racers, I suppose, something like that. Very simplistic games. I can't get through that gap there, that's ridiculous, because all these cactuses, or cacti as it was said in the instructions, are randomly generated. You can have spaces where there's absolutely nothing, and then ones where they're just too close to you. So graphics are very simple. There's no animation on any of them really, it's just static sprites moving around. The main car is supposed to be the Trans Am from Niterider, but it seems to be, oh, that's game over. It seems to be blue with pink edges rather than the black that you'd expect it to be, so that's a bit strange. They couldn't even be bothered to recreate the car accurately. The cactuses look okay, I suppose, graphically. There's a nice little lake there. I don't know why that's appearing periodically in the desert. I suppose it's an oasis. So yeah, it's very simple. Avoid the cactuses, avoid the enemies, and try and drop these oil slicks when a car, or sorry, when a bike comes up behind you. And that's about it really. As I said, the score constantly increases, and you also get a score bonus for using the oil slick on the bike. But you also lose some points for using the oil slick, so you've got to sort of pick and choose when to use them. And there you go, I managed to get 6 bikes and I'm on to level 2. The music, as with all these games, is just hideous. Actually, again, it's not as bad as some of the other games in the series, much like the graphics and gameplay are above average, I would say, actually, for one of these Darling Brothers games creator type games. I mean, you've seen all you're going to see in the first sort of 30 seconds of playing, but it's reasonably playable, I suppose. It doesn't mean I'm going to keep it. I'm definitely going to be selling it, and I won't be playing it again after this one playthrough. It was just intended to be a quick video to have a look at it before I sell it on. It's alright, isn't it? I mean, it give you some gameplay, high score challenge maybe for a little bit, but I don't know how much these sold for, maybe $7.95 or something like that. It's definitely not worth that. Very simplistic games, all of them. I mean, you compare it to something like Jungle Story or Bionic Granny or Dark Star, it's a little bit better than those, I would say. It's a little bit more fun, there's a little bit more variety in it, I suppose, as you're scrolling along. It doesn't feel sort of set out and like lacking any kind of variety or differences from as you progress. So yeah, I'm running out of things to say about it now, so I'm just going to play on until I lose the rest of my lives, I guess. I'm doing quite well here, actually. I managed to avoid a lot of cactuses or cacti. What do you prefer? Let me know in the comments. Cactus or cactuses or cacti? Those are your options. Yes, I'm struggling with things to say, so I'll just be quiet for a minute. Let you listen to this wonderful music. It does have some sound effects as well, to be fair to it. I mean, yeah, I wonder how long it took them to put these games together once they created this games creator thing that they made at least maybe 10 or 12 games from. It's pretty dire. But, as I say, not the worst of these games. Probably not the best either. although I'm struggling to think which one it is. Maybe Challenger, I think, was actually quite good. And Pigs in Space, that was pretty decent as well, you know, as these games go. But yeah, if it had been released by Mastertronic for $2.99 or $1.99 and wasn't called Niterider, I imagine, to get around any potential copyright things, then I don't know, it wasn't too bad, I suppose. But there you go, that was Niterider. If you've got any thoughts about the game, then let me know in the comments, and I'll be back with another video soon. I've already drawn that out of the tin last time around. It's going to be CJ in the USA, so tune in next time for that one. Thanks very much for watching this video, and see you next time.